from 2 weeks ago, so we can look at what we did 2 weeks ago and then continue on from number 50 through number 72. I hope that all of you have a new draft of the designations. Did you get it? Does anybody need a new draft? Everybody has one? Okay, thank you. At this point, what I'd like to do is ask if there are any corrections, deletions, or additions to the working committee meeting notes from February 22nd. Yes, sir. Page 3, number 25. Could you use the microphone, please?
I think the large note is on the south side rather than the north side, because the south side is where that bank is. Am I correct in that? I think so.
Well, let us look at that, because I can't answer you, because very frankly, I'm not. I think you're right, but let us look at it. If it has to be corrected, we'll correct it. Yeah. Other than Frank's comment, anybody else? So we'll accept the minutes, or not the minutes, we'll accept the notes as stated. Okay. Ramona, would you like to make comments?
Yes, and thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to let the committee know that I have been receiving comments from the public to make our documents that we're working on available to the public. If any public members come, that they can also look at it. I'm aware that we had decided early on that we wouldn't distribute, I don't know if that's the right word, our documents until we have finalized everything. But in the spirit of trying to share information with the public, they would like to be able to see it when we see it. But I also realize we probably don't have a quorum tonight, so to ask, for a vote or anything. But I just wanted to share with you some things that I'm receiving from the public to make our work more public. To give them like these documents if they showed up, so they could look at it too. I don't know if you have any comments about that, or but I just wanted to relate to you what I had been hearing.
I know that the Marconis attended last meeting and requested documents and were working on them, and they were instructed, or not, I think staff was instructed not to provide documents that are draft documents, because when they leave here, and you don't know what happens to them. For me personally, I don't care if folks are here and they want to see the documents we're working on, that's fine, as long as they're returned at the end of the meeting, because what you don't want to get is a lot of documents out there that are partial, get into people who weren't at the meetings, that don't understand the context of what's being discussed, what's in the progress of being discussed, and then end up in a lot of tangential conversations. But if folks want to show up, for me personally, and see what we're working on, as long as they turn those documents in at the end of the meeting until they become final, I personally don't have a problem with that. I think that's a way of encouraging folks to attend, because then they actually get to participate and see the working documents as they're progressing. But I think without partial documents before they're done is probably going to create problems. But some folks in the room may have more experience with that than I do.
I have a question. Before things actually become final, will there be an opportunity for public comment?
Yes. To answer you simply, yes. But then when we're done with our work and we think we've completed it, all of this has to go public, and it has to go before the town board to be approved too. So there'll be more than ample opportunity. Plus, at every one of the meetings, we also have public comments, so people at that point can comment in any portion of that meeting they wanted to. My concern is exactly what David already expressed. I'm concerned that if it gets out, it could be taken out of context. And that's the biggest problem that I have. Again, I would agree with David too. Certainly if people want to know what we're doing during the meeting, it's an open meeting. And we encourage the public to attend, so I think they should be able to listen and they should be able to learn from whatever we have to say. But at the same time, I'm just worried about it getting out, and then we'll end up spending more time trying to correct a misperception than we will in trying to get our work accomplished. And not only could the committee be taken into this, but I'm concerned about the department having to answer a lot of questions on things that we're doing that have not been finalized. Anyhow, but Ramona's point, there aren't really not enough people here tonight to really have a good discussion on it, so let's hold it to the next meeting, when hopefully we'll have almost everybody here. At that point, we'll bring it up again, and then we can decide what we want to do going forward. Is that agreeable? Okay, fine. All right, next. On this sheet, there are two things on this sheet that we need to look at. First is the red in the first 51 items. Those are where the corrections were made from what the current form and current type was, and the future transition to what. If you want to take a minute, you want to look at that and make sure that it coincides with the notes that you took at the last meeting, and if there's any conversation that has to take place on that particular part of tonight's agenda, let's do that now before we get into the portion that we left for tonight's meeting. So let me go through and look at number 10, which was the Eggert Strip. It was suburban and corridor, and we decided we'd like it to be traditional corridor. By the way, let me digress for just a second. Did everybody see the new examples that were given? You got that in the email packet that Dan sent out. If you had an opportunity to look at that, you'll see that the node was changed to medium scale and to low scale based on our conversation at the last meeting. Junior and senior? I was confused that they would be thinking about you and your son when we did that, or Rick and I. So everybody got this in the packet, so you saw that? Okay. All right, so let's look again at number 10. Are we in agreement that we decided that Eggert Strip should be a traditional corridor? Okay. Are we agreed on number 13, that Eggert Bailey should be a traditional medium-scale node? That was a change from a low-scale node to a traditional medium-scale node.
Dale, one question. When we started, for the first dozen or so centers, we were focusing on what should they be classified as today. And then as the evening progressed, we learned, evolved into also thinking about which ones should be changed for the future.
Right. We're looking at future.
And I just want to go back a step to number 10. My note, and I don't know if it was my opinion or the group opinion, that for the future it might evolve into a center. And I'm the only one that came up with that. Well, then that was just my personal notes and not what we came to in consensus.
Someplace in this mess, I have that.
My notes say that we were looking at that. What did you say? Going forward, we were looking at it as what?
My notes said a future center.
Future center.
That would be what I was thinking.
Because I don't. Yeah, I don't have that in mind.
Refer to that.
Yeah, 10. Yeah, Eggert Strip. Yeah, and also, originally 10 was Eggert and Niagara Falls Boulevard Strip, and we split it so that Eggert stands on its own, and Niagara Falls, Eggert is now number 10, and number 11 is Niagara Falls Strip by itself.
I'll drop it. I can't help my notes.
Yeah, I can't.
Something I was talking about.
Right. Okay. All right, so pressing on to number 13 then. Does everybody agree with traditional medium-scale node? Yes, that's what I showed too. Number 17, University Plaza, traditional center. I think that's a given, isn't it? Okay. Number 19, Transit and Millisport, suburban medium-scale node. Correct? Number 19? I feel like I'm calling bingo. We're okay with number 19? I didn't hear anybody object to it.
Numbering change?
Oh, yes, matter of fact, you know what? It did. Number 19. Yep, right. So, this... No, Transit Millisport was number 17.
In your note.
So I just want to point out that the numbering has changed on this sheet, but if you look at the other table, it has all of the marks in red from your comments last week, or last month, I should say. So the reason why the numbering has changed is because 10 and 11 have been split into 2, 25 has been split into 2, 31, and then some have been combined based on your comments. So this sheet reflects all of your comments, and then the one that you're looking at currently with the future designations in red just reflects what you've said. So when you said split into 2, I split those into 2. When you said combine the 2, I've combined the 2. So that's why you shouldn't pay attention to the number, just pay attention to the name of the center, because that hasn't changed, unless they've been split. So. Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, the numbers on the map correspond to the original one, not to the current one. Okay. Yeah, I know, it gets a little confusing. Yep. Yep. So let me go back and let me rephrase. Instead of talking about it numerically, let's talk about Transit and Millisport. In Transit and Millisport was originally number 17, and we had decided that we wanted to split the nodes at that point. So Transit and Millisport on the new one shows it as a suburban medium-scale node. Is that acceptable? Okay. Transit in North French, which is now 22, which was number 20. It was originally to be a center. We decided that we wanted it to be suburban medium-scale node. Correct, right? Okay. Main and Eggert, north side. This is one that we split. It is 27 on the new, and on the old, Main and Eggert was combined as number 25, and we wanted to make both of them nodes, and both of them are medium-scale nodes now. Well, although right. Yep. And should the south side also be medium? This is what we were talking about before. That should be small scale, should it? Yep. 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 So traditional on Main and Eggert north side is fine, but on south side it should be small scale. That's what you brought it up for. And that's what was wrong.
Right here, Frank.
So that would be the traditional medium-scale node.
I thought it was because everyone east and west. Right? North and south. Main, good. And then on the south side of Redwood. On the west side. This is the north of Main Street, on the west side of Redwood.
Look at Main and then it goes straight across the Main.
That's actually the Amherst west side.
Don't look at the diagonal. Yeah.
Look at the Amherst, when it gets down here, it's north-south. It does go east-west, and it's south-north, toward Maine. This is the northwest corner.
You okay?
Main Street going to the left is going south.
No.
It's going south, it's kind of going southwest. Let's not worry about all the cardinal directions, let's just worry about north and south, and so we agree it's on the north side of Main Street. This being Main Street, this being north. Okay. North side, south side, difference in character, difference in some difference of action, potential. Which would be the senior node, medium scale node, the lower scale node. Okay? Agree? Yeah.
Okay, so the north side will be traditional medium-scale node, correct? Okay, the south side will be small-scale node? We're all agreed?
Yes.
Okay. All right, next, Maine and Kensington, which is number 32 on the new sheet, originally designated as low-scale node. We decided it should be a traditional medium-scale node. Yep.
Where are we at, you're on 29 or 27? 29, so you're up here, Main Street, I-290.
No, we're not on 29. You're on the old 29, right. Yep, on the old 29.
Okay, so that's down here, right, Earl Kennington is down here, number 27.
Excuse me, sir. We're not really open for public discussion at this point. Would you please take a seat? We'll take a seat. Please. Thank you.
You're right now, you're at Harlem and Kensington.
Yes.
That's Harlem and Kensington. The Maine and Kensington, Harlem and Kensington.
Maine and Kensington. Right. 32 on the new map. So at Maine and Kensington, we said we want a traditional medium-scale node. Is that correct? Okay. On the new, it's number 33, it's west of the village of Williamsville. Originally, it had been designated as a center. We decided it would be traditional medium-scale node. And it was number 30 on the old sheet.
Tops parcel up here.
Yeah, we had originally said we wanted to make it a node. On my notes, it says node. So that medium-scale node would be okay?
Can I just ask a general question?
Sure.
I have in my head from the last time, and I want to make sure it's, the low scale node would be like 1 story, I've got medium scale is 1 or 2, corridors 3, centers 5. I've got that in my head for heights, as a guide for myself.
We really didn't specify heights at this point. We just said buildings may be
That's
higher
helping me
or
figure out
lower.
what's medium, what's low, what's a node, and what's a corridor.
Well, corridor buildings are lower. Medium scale node buildings
The
are...
corridor's lower than a center, but it's higher than a medium scale node.
It's a possibility, yeah.
Because it's specific to each individual site, you are
Okay. But am I wrong thinking that a low scale node is like 1 story, medium scale is maybe 2, corridor 3, center 5? Am I, is that a general ballpark?
Lee, you there? Yeah. I don't know if you heard the question. Did you hear the question? It relates to the heights that might be associated with each one of these center types. And so, Ramona has a question, how high the building might go, maybe maximum height to get to the area, is probably what you're looking for. So, from your perspective, the work you've done, can we start from the center and just work our way over to the right and give us your thoughts on what the maximum height might be in each one of those types, starting with center, corridor, medium scale, and so forth.
Well, if possible, the center would accommodate the tallest building in town right now, which I believe is the Marriott, and I think that's 10 stories. Is that right?
Yes.
But that does not mean that we can't use center and cap it at 5 stories or 8 stories or something shorter than 10. So there could be multiple districts within this type, but it is clearly, more than 3. So I would rather actually start at the other end. So I think low scale is 2 to 3 stories, and medium scale is 3 to 4 stories. The corridor, I don't know, the corridor would be interesting to look at a little bit more. When the corridor has deep parcels, it can support taller buildings. In the shallowest portions, it would be 3 stories. In the taller portions, it would get up maybe to 5 stories. And then centers would start from there and go to whatever we feel the maximum should be, and right now I would say it's 10.
Well, then I have a problem with that. When I'm trying to classify these on the nodes. Corridor and center I have no problem with. The nodes to me should be just lower.
Lower, well, okay.
Well, the low scale node is 2 to 3 stories.
Right. Which you'll find, I think you'll find many of those places actually have 2 to 3 stories. It may not seem that way because a lot of times they're set back away from the street. If you think of Harlem in Maine, there's a couple 3-story buildings there. You go down to Maine and Eggert, the Key Bank building is 3 stories high. There are buildings that are that high in those areas now. So are you suggesting that you should limit it to the 1 story there, or?
1 or 2, then 2 or 3. Yeah, I just said 1, so I'm sort of going up here a little bit. On the low scale, 1 or 2, and then I just know the feedback that I've been getting that I can understand corridor and centers being higher, but it's the nodes I guess I have the problem with right now being 3 stories or 4 stories.
So this is David, if I understood you properly. So in any particular category, we'll call it low scale, depending on where we're designating ultimately those areas that are low scale, one particular area may ultimately have a limit of 2 stories. But in another location where we say low scale, it might be a different limit. It's not necessarily universally applied across town-wide, regardless of where it is. So, and same thing with center. And correct me if I'm misunderstanding you, Lee. If we have 10 areas designated center throughout the town, some may permit heights up to 10 stories, for example. Some may only permit heights up to 6 stories, depending on characteristics of the context of that center. Is that correct?
Yes, so we intend to build a zoning toolkit that implements these concepts. And so if, for example, low scale stated 2 to 3 story, there would be a 2-story district and a way to get to 3 stories, whether that's an actual 3-story district or an allowance for a 3rd story only if it is, set back and more than this distance from the adjacent residential. But we can craft those rules either in an absolutist fashion by having 2 different flavors of the district, or in a sort of contextual fashion that picks up on what's in the surrounding area and basically manipulates what you can do on an individual site based on what's in the adjacent area.
So in the case of where Ramona is getting comments from some of her constituents, the answer to the question that she would have to presumably give would be, well, it depends upon that particular corner or whatever that somebody's asking her about. So you might have 2 different corners and 2 different constituents asking about a low scale or a junior node, and one to 2 stories might be what we ultimately determine is appropriate. Another one might be 2 to 3 because of what is already existing around it. Is that, once again, don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that correct?
Yes, I think that's fair. I will say in the marketplace of new buildings, we rarely see any 2-story buildings. So if you set 1 to 2, you will primarily get 1. And if that's your intent, that's fine. But 2-story as a new building type is very rare.
From our notes, Lee, this is Gary. From my notes from last 2 weeks ago, when we first started talking about dividing the node into junior and senior, or low and medium scale, I walked away thinking that the shortest would be, the lowest would be, the low scale was 1 to 2 stories, and then 2 to 3 stories for the taller node. In the corridors, we had a broader range. At least in my notes, I wrote down 2 to 3, and I didn't think we came up with a maximum height in the centers, and that was based on we had a pretty lengthy conversation when we reviewed the forms and the center type size. So I think based on what you just said, depending on the locale, would 1 to 2 for the low scale and 2 to 3 for the medium scale be unworkable? Are we tying our hands with those heights? Or is it just relative for now because we're comparing?
So the 1 to 2 will give you new, if any, it will give you new 1-story building. That's what the marketplace is likely to give you, and that's only my personal opinion. You can certainly ask around. You've got some developers on the committee. The 3 is fine for the medium scale nodes if that's what you select, and if that's kind of the community tolerance. That is not, to say that you would rather not see anything at 4 stories there is just fine. I would ask you only to consider then, when you categorize these, whether particular locations could support a little more height, in which case you might want to throw them into a different category. I wouldn't want to see the centers map be graded across the entire town, based on 1-story differentials in height. It really should be, something about this combination of suburban and traditional, and matching those up with the concept of lot depth, lot width, and the possibility that these will change. One thing that Dan had asked me to share with you is that I think the horizon for this, that what you are mapping is what you would like to see in the near future. And by near future, I mean 5 to 10 years. Beyond that, we really can't think that far. We can't out-predict the market that far, etc. So I would love it if you would kind of keep 5 to 10 years in mind. And if you're saying, hey, in 5 to 10 years, nothing's going to change, this thing can be the exact height that it is now, and it's just fine, that's kind of one approach. But if there are particular places where you would like to see yourselves get infill buildings and get some replacement perhaps of existing buildings, then you have to think about making certain that there's enough economic incentive for the market to come in and actually build you something new there.
Okay. Let's take a poll of the committee, because we could continue this conversation probably for the next hour. Those who think low scale should be 1 to 2 story, please put your hand up. Those that think it could be 2 to 3 story, put your hand up. Okay, so the majority of people appears go for the 2 to 3. Lee, I take into consideration what you said, and I'm sure that there are going to be situations on the low scale going forward where we're going to want to limit it to 1 story because of the close proximity to single-family residences. But at the same time, going to the 2 to 3 may give us a little more flexibility. And since we're trying to go for a little more flexibility, maybe that's the way to approach it at this point. Okay, so let's go back.
Or we could cap it at 2 stories in certain areas.
Well, I guess one thing to be very clear about is we are involved in a process which will occur continuing, on into the future, which is a sort of 2-step between planning for something and then zoning for it. Just because we plan for 3 does not mean we have to zone for 3. So there are both of those steps involved. Certainly there's more comfort if both those steps are in absolute alignment. If there is no circumstance ever where I want any more than a 2-story building, then we should probably have a category that accommodates that.
A zoning category that accommodates that? Or a
We will definitely have a zoning category, but if people are absolutely adamant about this in certain locations in the community, we might have to use one of these centers categories for that as well, just to provide the comfort that the plan and the zoning say the same thing. If people are not comfortable hearing 2 to 3 stories, then we need to change the rhetoric.
Okay, based on that, Ellen?
Is this on?
Yeah.
I think more of a concern for many people might be the 3 to 4, the 4-story. 3 may be okay, 4 kind of problematical. If I think of some place like Transit in Millersport, which is a very rural place, really, has a country style to it, and I think about putting a 4-story building there, it would really be very disruptive. And the other thing, maybe I'm misunderstanding this whole process, but I thought the idea of this was to have some standards so that there wouldn't be so many exceptions all the time. So when you say, 3, but maybe 4, or 4, but maybe 5, it kind of seems to defeat the purpose to me, if I'm understanding this process correctly.
Somebody else have their hand up?
Please, you want?
Well, I can certainly answer kind of the second half of that, which is, yes, the intent here is to write very prescriptive zoning from which you will get a very predictable outcome. And so, yes, if we are saying, 3 to 5, then we'll have a zone at 3 and we'll have a zone at 5. And how you apply those on the map in the next round for the application of the zoning to the map will determine, which of those flavors we have. It doesn't mean that the plan level information has to be, pinned down to the exact story height. I think when we're talking about this, we're caught on height right now, and we aren't talking about any of the other tools that ought to be engaged in the conversation, like how do you manage the transition, and maybe even in a story in a district that allows 4 stories, you won't be able to get there because it's too close to adjacent residential, for example.
Does that help you any? Somewhat? Okay. Yes, sir.
Just a quick comment from the a developer's perspective. Certainly, we've got to be very sensitive when we're developing a project that the height is in context with what's surrounding a piece of property, and we are sensitive to that. But at the same time, I would just caution that by limiting the number of stories to, say, 1 or 2, you're also limiting the economic development potential for a particular piece of property. And I would also remind the group that we are talking about mixed use, and we should remember to recognize the value of mixed-use, dense developments, because they create a sense of vibrancy and economic health, especially in areas like the commercial centers we're talking about. So, again, just a word of caution about limiting the height level too drastically.
I can appreciate Carl's comments for economic development. What I'm just concerned of at the moment is the nodes. The nodes seem to be more in the residential areas and limiting the height with the residential areas. You know, if the node isn't in the residential area, then dandy. So.
Okay, so let's again take one more poll on this. Everybody's in favor of the low-scale node being 1 and 2 stories only. Put up your hands, please. 1 and 2 stories. Sir, you're not a member of the committee. You can't vote. In the low-scale node, limiting to 1 or 2 stories. 2, okay. In the low-scale node, 2 to 3 stories. Still have the same feeling. I'm sorry. Okay, all right. So, Lee, at this point, the majority of people, and we don't have a lot of people here tonight, unfortunately, but the majority of people at this point go along with your theory of 2 to 3 story on the low scale.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Now, let's go back to this again, otherwise we're never going to get through this thing. We are on number 33 on the new sheet, west of the village of Williamsville. We had suggested a traditional medium-scale node, which would be 3 to 4 stories. Are we in agreement with that? That's what we're talking about now. Yep. Are we okay with that? Everybody's okay? All right. Now we're dealing with number 34 on the new sheet, which is Main South Forest, north side, which was which was number 31 on the old one. We wanted it split into 2. So it's Main South side, South Forest rather, north side, was listed as a suburban center. We talked about making a traditional medium-scale node. And that was basically because it was a deeper parcel. We agreed on that? On the south side, because it was a more shallow, we had decided it would be a traditional corridor. That's okay? All right. Number 39 in the new sheet, which is the main strip, it's listed as suburban corridor. We had talked about making a traditional corridor. That was, I have no idea where I am. It was 37, right. Are we okay with that? Traditional corridor? Okay, and the last one that we had changed was on the new sheet, number 45, Sheridan and Harlem. It was listed as suburban center. We had talked about making it a traditional center. That was number 43 on the old. Are we okay with that? 45. Sharon Harlem. On the new one, it's number 45, Sharon Harlem. On the old one, it was number 43. We okay on that traditional center? No, it's still remaining. Yep. And that's what my note shows too from last meeting, traditional. Want to use the mic?
I remember we talked about that a lot, and there was some discussion about continuing it to be a corridor, but in the end, I believe we settled on it being a center.
Yep. Yep. So we okay with that? All right. Okay.
Both sides are traditional.
Okay, let's move on to the blue area on your sheets, University Place. It's recommended as traditional center. Oh,
They're probably going to have some questions. Okay, Lee, you good on the line? Lee, you good on the line?
Yeah, I'm still here.
okay, let's have discussion on number 50, which is University Place Traditional Center. Well, it doesn't make any difference to the old number was. We never had any conversation on this. This is new conversation. Oh, on the map. Yeah, can you put the map back up again?
The numbers haven't changed for the ones we haven't touched yet.
Oh, okay. The numbers haven't changed for those. Yep, we're just repeating some of the numbers. Right, yeah. Yep. So, if you look at the map, what do you guys think about this? You guys and you ladies. Any comments? Traditional center, is that okay? It's all University Plaza.
What's your question, Gary? University Place. University Place.
Place, rather.
What's your question, Gary? Sweet Home Road, Ranch Road, University of Buffalo. Oh. There's a road down here. This is one of the places we visited on the tour? Right?
Well, but remember, it's what you want to see going forward. It's not what it is today. It's what you want to see it going forward. What would you like to see it going forward?
I can change my next time.
I mean, well, let's put it another way. If it were to be redeveloped, would it be redeveloped in its current form, or would it be redeveloped in a new form?
Where's the hotel that's going up? I'm trying to...
It's off of Rice Road.
Right there,
behind
right.
here.
Okay.
That's not the one that you guys approved the other night, which is going next to Northtown. Right. Yes.
I don't see how that fits the traditional style. I can't imagine that being transformed into the more sort of walkable type of community because it's kind of plopped next to a really major street. It seems more like the suburban form in my unprofessional opinion.
Is there consensus on that? Should it be more suburban? Yes, everybody seems to think it should be more suburban. Okay, so let's change that one. Kim, you got that? Suburban. Okay, number 51, the Golden Triangle, Suburban Center. Number 51 on your map.
Marriott Hotel, Triangle.
Suburban Center seems to be logical. Yeah, okay. All right, we'll leave that one as is. Number 52, Maple and Amherst Manor Suburban Corridor. Number 52. No. So suburban corridor probably would be appropriate, right? Okay, we'll leave that one as is. Number 53, the Gun Club, Suburban Center.
Well, this is one that we should talk about looking to the near future. This is one we certainly should talk about in terms of what we like to see there in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
It's not going to redevelop, it's going to be developed.
Well, are you sure it's going to be developed?
Maybe I know less than anybody else.
Well,
No, I don't.
I mean, it's been vacant for quite a long time now.
But we're taking, if our charge is to look at commercially zoned properties and come up with something for the future, we didn't pull this one out of the mix as we did with some others a month or so ago. It stayed in the mix, so I'm assuming we got a plan for it to be developed. We missed our opportunity to take it out.
There's also a question on this from the standpoint, the center really doesn't allow for the residents across the street on Maple Road. Should it be a node?
Since it's all residential in that area.
Except it backs up to UP.
Well,
We're looking at Maple Road here.
there's two sides to Maple Road, though. To me, I'm not sure it has the parcel depth to be considered a center, because it seems somewhat similar in depth to the Maple Amherst Manor parcel down the street.
These are the apartments.
So you're not including the apartments?
Yeah, this is the depth of the
I
apartment.
see, yeah.
Would you be interested in making it a suburban medium-scale node? Based on its proximity?
I see nodes, without looking at the geography on the map, in general, as something that's going to be more surrounded by residential and accessible to the residents. And this property isn't likely to be surrounded by residential, and I'm not sure if Maple is any more a street that's accessible. I think it's more a barrier. I'm all for the nodes, but corridor, unfortunately, is when it physically fits.
Well, but corridor, to your point, Gary, and I'm just playing devil's advocate with you, okay, anybody, is also may or may not be near single-family residential along a commercial roadway. Is that portion of Maple Road to be considered a commercial roadway? Yes, ma'am.
My answer to that would be no, not really. And if it's classified as a center, that permits a pretty intensive, potentially high-rise development there, which I think would be really out of character with the surroundings.
Well, I'm going to guess the reason why it was classified as a center is because they consider that interchange there with Millersport Highway to be a major intersection. Gary.
I mean, the other consideration may be the history of the site and the fact that there was an approved plan for a center at that, a lifestyle center at that location. I think that may have something to do with how it was initially designated. Whether or not that was appropriate or not is a question for the committee to answer.
Good point.
My recollection is it had more of a traditional form. It wasn't up to the street because there was some concern about the street itself. Included it being brought up to the street, but my recollection is that it had traditional form.
Well, I don't think anybody objects to suburban as much as to the current form. I think everybody would kind of, at least nobody has said anything about it being other than suburban. Nobody's got a real strong opinion, though.
It's a tough one because the parcel is large. It's not necessarily overly deep, it's not shallow, but it's a large parcel. And I'm trying to think, if I'm living on the opposite side of Maple Road and I have to see something done there, I can see things that I wouldn't like that are single-story because it's a big, giant, Walmart-esque type project. It's got a lot of traffic, and I can see some things that are taller that have less traffic that I might actually prefer as long as it's set back. But I'm not sure. I'm having trouble fitting it into a slot, one of our 4 slots.
I can understand that. Yes, Ramona.
I agree with you, or I think I agree with you. I could see that as a medium-scale node with, not gigantic buildings, but possibly 2, maybe 3 stories.
So a medium-scale node may be the compromise.
That seems like a place for a mixed-use, possibly, development, if it had an adequate amount of landscaping.
Gary, you have a thought?
And an opposite thought. If it's big enough to be a center, and it could have internal roadways, then it could be traditional, in the traditional form, even if the uses right up on Maple Road aren't, or like front uses aren't right up on Maple Road. That's what we're here for. It could change.
So that almost would beg the question, why is it even on a list? All right.
Could you show the map in front of us exactly what piece of property we're looking, or what portion of the property we're looking at then?
About 600 feet deep? Okay. Well, that probably would be an educated guess, though.
I have a question with the original proposal for this property. Does anyone recall the number of stories that were proposed in any given building?
Yeah. Was it 4 stories?
Was it 4?
Yeah.
I can see up to 4 or 5 stories.
All right, so we keep on going back as we talk about it, and I think Alan made the point that a medium-scale node may be appropriate, 3 to 4 stories, near single-family residential, at intersections, and although it's a little bit distant from the intersection of Millersport Highway, maybe it's appropriate.
Suburban medium-scale node.
Yeah, suburban medium-scale node.
I can get my arms around that.
Okay, how many people would agree with suburban medium-scale node? Okay, that's what it'll be, suburban medium-scale node. Okay, number 54, Maple and North Forest, suburban node. Any thoughts? Maple, North Forest, suburban node. It works? Does. It's a good question. Is it a medium scale or a low scale node? We agree on node, but do we agree on medium or low scale? Low scale? Low scale, everybody seems to agree on node, low scale.
So just for your information, photograph, sheet that we have here, that is North Forest, the one that you characterized as the field node.
I think it's appropriate for a medium scale node, personally.
Well, certainly have a mixed bag there. Now that Dan has muddied the water by pointing out.
I just want, it gives you a look at, there it is up there. I mean, it gives you an idea of what's there.
I mean, what's there may not change dramatically over the next 5 to 10 years, but if the issue in terms of lower to medium scale is related to, as Carl was just mentioning, is the residential around it, it's pretty well buffered from residential.
Right. It is.
So it's a location where you, to the extent redevelopment was occurring, you could probably go a little taller, a little denser.
The office, south side?
Yeah. 1 story.
You got a historic building on the southeast corner, so that's not going anywhere.
These buildings here, I think, 2 to 3.
Where?
Right here.
Those are 2 to 3.
The People
and if
Inc.
you go
building.
Even on
Right.
if you went on the north side, on the east north side, those are at 2 stories. Yep.
Mike, may I ask, what are the boundaries of this? Is it the sort of rectangle surrounding the intersection?
They're tired of listening to us.
So, Alan, to go back to your question for a moment, really, right now, is this piece here, over, doesn't include right here. This area, right here.
And there really isn't anything that's residential around there. Well, those apartments are half commercial at this point. It really surprised me, but there's a lot of commercial endeavors in that. So maybe medium would be more appropriate going forward. Did we agree on that? Yes.
I would would go for low scale, and one consideration would be I know it's maybe not on our agenda, but the proximity to the creek and the impact of a much increased number of people and what people bring with them going in.
Good point. Good point. All right, let's take a vote on it. In favor of low-scale node, please put up your hands. In favor, are you low-scale? Oh, okay, so there's no discussion, low-scale. Okay, number 55, Maple Strip Suburban Corridor. Okay, we all right with that? That's kind of like a no-brainer. Okay. Maple and Air Suburban Node. And again, which node? 56 Maple and Air. There's a gas station on one corner, there's senior housing on another corner, there's a medical complex on another corner, and there's a the medical complex on the other corner, so. And it's adjacent to residential. Low node? Everybody in agreement, low node? Yes. Okay. Number 57, Clearfield Plaza, Suburban Node. Where is it on that?
Shopping center,
Calling this low makes me go back and think this is low for the other one. This is no force, low. I can't see calling this medium and not calling it
No, Maple North Forest is low.
that's what we agree on.
But,
To me, that makes it seem like this should also be low.
well, you got proximity of a lot of residents around there, too. So low would be, in my mind, low would be appropriate. We agreed low would be appropriate? Okay. Okay, Sweet Home and Skinnersville, number 58, Suburban Corridor. Does that seem appropriate? Okay, Suburban Corridor it is. Number 59, Gettsville Plaza, Suburban Node. And is it low or is it medium? I think we would all agree suburban on Millersport Highway, pretty suburban. Now you have a dilemma as to whether it's low or it's medium, because you've got such a mixed bag out there. Isn't it? Doesn't that include that? Just the plaza by itself, not including where ITT was, and goes all the way up to, where Nina is. Right, yeah, right, Buck Waters.
The node is pretty big. This is where I start to get a real problem with the border node. And I think node is more centralized, almost into where the two streets go together and create something around that. Where the center is stretched out along a road, makes it more of a corridor.
At the charrette workshop we had, I sat at this table, and I think the result is was more to transform it to a node to serve the neighborhood to the east. I can picture it as a node because I sat in on that visioning piece.
The neighborhood to the east?
Well, we talked a lot about how to get access to the Audubon community.
Right. Yeah, because there is none. Yeah. So, should it be a suburban corridor? Suburban corridor could, if it were a deep, according to Lee, if it were a deep parcel, could be 5 stories. If it were a shallow parcel, could be 3 stories.
Going in the future,
in my discussion between corridor and a node, I would have a problem with, I still think of it as a corridor, but I'd have a problem if we start putting 5-story buildings along here. So I don't think, if there's area near here, I think that it could work, but not at this particular location. It should be low. It's right in the middle of residential. So you'd,
But my personal opinion, the parcels, despite the fact that they're larger when you go south, they're not that large, because they're in between Millersport Highway and Stall Road. They're kind of crammed in there, so it doesn't... Oh, sure, yeah.
Right. I think this is, I'm not mistaken, this is the piece of the
Yes, right.
The one concept
Yep, good. Right.
I have a question. I understand that Lee had suggested up to 5 stories for the corridor designation, but will the code allow for some contextual realities, like Duncan suggested, maybe requiring a maximum or allowing a maximum of maybe 3 stories in certain corridors where it makes sense?
He did, because he said on the shallow it would be up to 3 stories, and I would presume this would have to be considered shallow. There's not much depth at all. Even on the IT&T parcel, there's not much depth.
Yeah, I think he said that when you get into the layering, the next round of what we do here, that in order to get to 5 stories, you're probably going to have site characteristics that allow you to do that. And in a very shallow site, you're not going to be able to achieve it because you're not going to have the depths or the other characteristics of the site to allow you to get that tall. So that the constraints of the property limit the height based upon how we formalize that land use classification.
So, have we come to any conclusions?
It feels like a corridor to me, and as long as we can nuance the height level given the context, I'm okay with a corridor.
I live near here, so the only concern I have about a corridor is Millersport Highway is 50 miles an hour through here, so it's hard for me to visualize buildings up close to the street because it's a highway. So I think what's there is probably going to be there for the most part for a while, but I think having a little bit of setback from Millersport makes sense just because of the high speed of Millersport Highway. There isn't a signal, and the signals are between North Forest and Campbell Boulevard. It's a pretty long stretch there. You have a pretty high rate of speed going through there, so it's kind of hard for me to visualize buildings up tight to Millersport and feeling cute and cozy and villagey at a 50-mile-an-hour highway, but maybe I'm just seeing it.
Well, would that be more addressed, would that be more addressed by the suburban part?
Oh, so, I'm sorry, thanks, I'm sorry. Okay, I stand correct.
So, suburban corridor.
Suburban corridor, is that okay with everybody? No? Well, let's take a vote. Anybody in favor of suburban corridor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Well, okay. Medium scale node, raise your hand. 3. Frank, do you have an opinion? No, but is node or corridor? I think a node. I think the node would have it then. It would be a medium node, would it not? Okay. Okay, moving on. Number 60, Campbell and Dodge, traditional node. Well, past Libros, up the road a bit. Yep.
This area of Campbell and Dodge, I'm liaison to the Historic Preservation Commission, and many of those buildings there they want to protect.
Are they?
And so I would think the least amount, the low-scale node, would be appropriate for this area. There's 4,
Port of entry buildings.
the port of entry, there's several different ones that they're looking at right now. So, I know from those residents who serve on the Historic Preservation Commission, they wouldn't want anything really done to this intersection here.
Yeah, but it should be then, I would say, a low node. Low node, everybody okay with that? All right, low node. Okay, Dodge Strip, suburban corridor. Number 61 on your program. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of discussion on that, is there? Okay. Number 62, Hopkins and Dodge, suburban node.
Right, this is across from North High School.
Actually, an area where medium would fit in.
Would you,
Other node where we right up now.
you'd put three to 4 stories in there?
And some other medium nodes.
I don't know.
I think.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I could see residential over retail there going up to 3 or 4 stories. Could see it.
I don't see the 4, but I can see the 3, since it is across from a fairly large building of Williamsville North. For a medium-scale node,
So this would be one that might fit into one of those odd situations where it would be limited to 3, but it could be a medium node. Okay. Medium node, limitations noted. Number 63, Sweet Home in North French, suburban node.
Across the street from the gas station or
Both things. Yep. So would that be a low or medium node? I mean, it's suburban, that's pretty given. Except on the southeast corner. The southeast corner is residential.
this is on NCDSA.
What do you guys think, low node or medium node? Low? Low, everybody agreed, low? Okay. Number 64, Campbell and North French, suburban node. This should not take a lot of discussion. Low node? Okay. Cross Point, suburban center. You can recuse yourself if you want to, Mr. Montani. You're just talking about the intersection. Are we okay with suburban center? Yep. Everybody's okay with that? All right. And last but not least, Millersport, Smith, and New, suburban corridor. I'm sorry, Gary?
Inside the parcel was cut out primarily.
I don't the sheets I'd received to actually remove entirely this, mhm. So that was the part that was in grade 67.
Yep, well, that's 66. Thoughts? Yes, Alan?
I wonder if there's a sprawl consideration there, and that it is, you know, it's edging on the more rural part of the town. I don't know if that's part of our decision process, but,
Well, it's listed as suburban, which probably is as close as what you're gonna get to what you want.
oh,
Also, I think Walmart wanted to go there, and I know my neighbors fought that vehemently. So,
Why would that be 66 be D&D along
Well, these are not zone TND. This, these are general business. The TND is this parcel right here. Well, maybe I'm wrong. This piece is GB. I guess the TND goes over to here unless I'm missing a line somewhere. Yeah, okay, so this is GB. The other consideration here is, can you just pan north or south a little? South, sorry. Can you turn on the floodway? Is it? So you can see what the floodway does to this piece. Pretty much takes that out of consideration, as it does this area here, the TND piece. And this is rather small. We're not sure really how feasible that is for development. So your question again, please, because I don't.
Would it be feasible to take it out of general business and put it in D&D?
This piece?
Well, everybody gets all into some, just 66, which is on.
I have the map in front of me, so I'm not sure which. 66
north side.
is this piece?
Yes.
So take that, say again now? Take that.
Take it out and make it equal to 67.
I'm not sure what that does.
Well, we took some out from commercial.
We're saying 67 is basically out of play here in terms of the center. The center is constrained to 66 at this point.
And when we took 67 out, but why not 66? Well, we have to keep everything in commercial and commercial. Although I just said that, when you look at the bigger map, it's the only suburban center area for a big chunk of suburban part of town.
Right, again,
I understand why we might not want so many centers. On the other hand, when you look at the map, the north end of the map, not a lot of
right.
stuff.
So, you're,
People learn.
yeah, that's what I thought.
Put it all on the table.
Yeah. So, just, again, just going back a little bit in history, again, this is all zoned SC at one point in time. Traditional neighborhood development is a mixed-use district, which allows both residential and commercial development. And so, in order to preserve some ability to develop this in a commercial form that might be able to service this area of the town, as you point out. This is kind of preserved up here at the frontage, and this is identified as out of place for that particular parcel. That's right. It's zone TND.
If I could, I'm also chair of the Town of Walnut Creek Flood Mitigation Committee, which we study Ransom Creek and its floodplain and floodway. Just had a meeting a couple of weeks ago on how Ransom Creek backs up. Smith, and if you go to the east, Smith and Dan gets flooded. Where it's impassable. Last time that happened was in December 2013. Since I live in the Ransom X area, people go to shop at Transit and North French area. When I've asked people about this area up here, they would prefer not to see it developed. I would like to see 66 removed and make it like 67 Gray.
I'm not sure I just understand something. Explain it to me. So, 66 was removed, or 67 was removed because it's T&D, which allows mixed use. Mixed use is what we're saying is permitted in commercial. So, I'm not sure what differentiates T&D from mixed use that's permitted in commercial. I don't understand.
What we're suggesting here is if this did develop as T&D, we would prefer to see that development, the commercial piece of that, occur up here as opposed to back here. Was it obvious?
Personally, I don't have any strong feelings about this parcel one way or the other. I would only suggest that what we kind of do here and what ultimately comes of this will ultimately translate into how people view parcels that they own. If they think the property has been devalued, they'll be going to the assessor's office to seek grievances to reduce their assessments because it was this, now it's that. So there is an economic, result or outcome to what we're doing here. So if there's a chance to kind of create some commercial development up close to the property, even if it doesn't happen for 20 years, but it allows that commercial development to take place there and keeps that property value up, that's good for the town in other perspectives. So I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other than from the property owner's perspective, kind of preserving some value for that property to be commercially developed, at least along the street. So for me, the suburban corridor is fine for that little skinny parcel and what may occur on the east side of Millersport. That's just my...
Well, I guess first we should figure out whether or not the committee thinks it should even be included. Since there's been a point made, maybe it should not be included. So should we decide that first before we go any further?
Could you explain the alternative to it not being included? What would that make it?
Well, actually, if it were not included, okay, we would just not deal with it, all right, and it would actually become just part of the other parcel, 67. We just let it be T&D.
But that means it's T&D, but that T&D owner has the opportunity to kind of still put some commercial on that.
Right.
So by doing nothing, it ends up being that anyway. So I guess I'm not sure doing
and it would have to be dealt with at that point.
Well, the other thing to remember, what we're doing here is we're formulating the comprehensive plan. So this is your opportunity to provide some guidance to the development of that parcel should it occur. So if you just leave it go as it is, then it won't be addressed in the plan. Probably wouldn't be.
Does that answer?
Basic measure. approach.
Okay.
Urban change.
So we continue to include it. If we continue to include it, and that seems to be the consensus that we're getting from the experts, to protect ourselves going forward, in a sense, then suburban corridor is appropriate. One no, and how many yeses? Okay, yeses have it. Suburban corridor it is. All right, so essentially we're complete, right? Okay. All right. I think there was some good conversation. I don't know about the rest of you, but I learned a couple things tonight that I didn't know before, which is always good.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask a question?
Sure.
For chance. I know that we've taken off of this the number 70, which is the town facilities. And I just wondered, that area is just the town area, doesn't affect any of the other properties in that area?
It's just the town, it's just the town.
Just the town?
Just the town area.
Okay, then going any beyond that would be outside our purview at this time. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Not yet.
I have one last question. I don't know what it does to Dan's process. We ended up taking 2 meetings to do this. 2 weeks ago, we had a small group. This week, we have a small group, and they're different small groups. Is the door closed on all of these decisions now, Dan, or?
As I see it, we're going to provide this information back to Code Studio to more formally identify which is which. We'll fix the list so it reflects the comments that we collected over the last couple of weeks, couple of meetings, I should say, and then we'll push it back out to the committee, and we'll have one more opportunity as a committee to say, yeah, this is where we want to go, or no. So one thing I would do is urge your colleagues to attend. The next meeting is scheduled for March 29th. So we'll probably stick to that unless I hear otherwise. So it's a Wednesday, and it's a date we've been talking about for a while. So is there anybody here this is your job. Anybody opposed to the 29th?
It's quite all right, go ahead.
Right. If not, then we'll stay with that date. Again, just please, we'll certainly encourage folks that aren't here to be here, but that will be an opportunity to kind of fix this, and we can move forward. The consultant is already started to work on the ordinance itself, and really that's addressing issues that the building department and the planning department have identified over the last 2 years. So they're beginning to look at the code already, but they're waiting for this information to go ahead and start formulating plan text that ultimately will guide the code revisions that what we're seeking at the end of the process. So,
and I'll answer you in another way. From my perspective, this is not going to end, and it will always be open for comment until the town board gets its blessing on it. No matter what we decide at this point, no matter what the technical committee decides, it's really up to the town board to bless everything that we do. So there'll be a lot of opportunity for public comment, and as it should be. So, okay.
I have one more suggestion,
Sure.
possibly for April. I don't have my blue book with me, so I don't know if we had already scheduled an April meeting,
Not yet.
but if we could stay away from the week of Easter week.
Yes. Easter is. It would normally be. We'd normally be after it. Okay, as Dan already took my juice away from me by telling you the next meeting is March 29th, 2017 at Village Hall at 7 p.m. And I'm preaching to the choir because several of you were here at the last meeting, and several of you are here again for this meeting, it would be nice if we could get a full committee, or close to it. I'm sure everybody has good reason for not being here, but it would be nice to have, oh, it's a joint meeting, that's right, on the 29th, which makes it even better. Okay, all right. Now public comment. Tommy, you wanted to say something?
Yes. You didn't mention, but I would urge you to include the Youngs Road, as far as including it in the commercial, as far as the commercial corridor in the comprehensive plan. And that, this is very important as far as the intention of the, as far as the NYSERDA grant for a statewide program having to do with the Route 5, which is, and the I-90 as far as an interconnectivity planning project. Now, the mayor met with the governor regarding some issues having to do with Main Street, but also as far as there was one of the village members at the town, the Association of Towns, as far as New York State, as far as the issues having to do with the planning that goes back to 1969 for Youngs Road, but also the toll booth on Transit Road, that this is a part of the moving forward for 2050 as far as the transportation, the vision for transportation in Buffalo, Niagara. That this is a demonstration project that will to mitigate the traffic on Main Street, but also to reconcile the issue as far as the AQuest, the $4 million that the planning department flushed down the toilet for the development, as far as that this project involves, and they're developing in Clarence now, as far as the golf dome. They're putting a subdivision in over there. That this project affects, as far as the travel plaza in Clarence, that this is an economic development project, long-term.
Okay, Tom, I have to interrupt you. You're getting way off where we're involved, okay? That really has nothing to do with this committee, but thank you for your comments.
Well,
Tom, that's it. Tom, that's nothing to do.
I'm sure you're going to put Worley Drive in there as far as the connection.
No, we're not going to. We're going to have nothing to do with the toll plazas. Thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to it. You guys do good work.
Thanks, Tom. Yes, sir. Could you give him the microphone, please?
My name is Anthony Marconi. I asked that you revisit Main Street from Main and Bailey to Main and Kensington. It's Lee, the last time he was here suggested that we ride any geographic area that you're interested in and collect your thoughts on the height of the buildings. I did that on Main Street. The only buildings that are more than 2 stories are public buildings, churches, schools. There is no multifamily properties. It's a Tudor corridor, and I suggest that it's historic preservation worthy. If in this whole process there is a opportunity for historic preservation, I suggest to you that this is it, Main Street is it, and that you take that into consideration. I also understand that Main and Kensington is not currently a mixed-use activity center, and we will be making it that. I would also suggest that the rest of Main Street, which is again predominantly Tudor, I guess no residential,
mixed-use predominantly Tudor structures, no more than 2 stories, and historic preservation. I suggest that we limit it to 1 and 2 stories. Thank you.
Thank you for the suggestions. We'll have the consultant look into it.
If I can add one more, didn't you just comment that it's 2 to 3 stories now? Main Street?
No, not all of it.
Just
the corridors that we dealt with. The suggestions that you're making are outside of what we've done.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The corridors that you're suggesting are outside, at least I understand them to be outside of what we're looking at today.
I'm talking about the mixed-use corridor.
Right, they're not included in what we've been looking at so far. You're suggesting other areas to be considered.
Main in Kensington, Main in Harlem, Main in Amherst.
We've already looked at those.
Yes,
Main and Harlem,
I'm suggesting
right.
that instead of 2 to 3, we limit it to 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Oh, I guess there's nobody else. All right, any other comments from anybody on the committee? If not, we'll see you on the 29th. Thank you.
Yeah.